So I recently made a post on social media inviting people to, instead of trying to change the world to prevent them from being triggered, that they could make themselves untriggerable instead. And I was really happily surprised, really, by the overwhelming response that was so positive from people supporting this. And, for people asking for some help as to how do I do that? What do I do to make that happen? And so there was a few responses which were not in agreement with my position. And they were basically saying that people who have been exposed to trauma, they don't have a choice to not be triggered. They are basically helpless, is what they were saying, and that we should change ourselves to accommodate them and to hold space for them. And I just thought that this message, this idea, was part of the problem, massive part of the problem as to why I made that post. And here's why. First of all, the people who made that post, I think they were assuming certain things about myself. For instance, that I don't know what trauma is or haven't experienced it myself. And let me tell you, with no uncertain terms, certainly, that I have experienced massive trauma. Now, I don't want to compare my trauma to someone else's, because I know there are people out there in the world who have experienced things far, far worse than myself. However, just to give you guys a clue into one of the things that I've experienced in my life, when I was 15 years old, my parents mistakenly put me into a cult. They thought it was going to help me. They thought it was going to stop me from being such a reckless youth who, was kind of wild and got myself into trouble. And they didn't realize that this place utilized certain tactics, such as they limited my speech. They wouldn't let me speak to other people who were on the same phase as I was. And so even looking at those people or communicating with them through hand gestures were cause for getting me restrained. Now, here's the thing also. Not only was I kept in a warehouse for 12 hours a day, berated with messages that were demoralizing and dehumanizing, but then if I acted out in any way against those messages, against those rules, which were completely inhuman, such as making eye contact with somebody on my same phase, let's say, I would be picked up by the other kids in the program, 5 or 7 at a time, whatever it took, slammed on the ground, put in arm bars, neck locks, pinned down and suffocated and held there for 20, 30, 40 minutes, an hour or so, until a staff member came around and determined that I was okay to go back to the group and listen to their messages again. Also, if I didn't cooperate and write certain papers that they wanted me to write, basically think of a prison camp where you're forced to write scathing messages about your country, denouncing the United States. We've heard of these things, right? So imagine that if I don't write these papers daily, what they would do, and they did this to me, they kept me from sleeping. They wouldn't let me sleep more than 3 hours a night. They would wake me up every half an hour, until I got 3 hours of sleep. And then they would keep me up the rest of the night. Now, we got about 2 meals a day in this place. Breakfast was, a bowl of cereal. And then dinner was the main meal. They told me for my dinner, because I wouldn't comply, I would get an apple and a warm glass of water. So I endured these harsh treatments, being beaten multiple times, held down by children, by other kids in the program, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, suffocated, put in joint locks, and they would line up, stand you up, scream in your face until spit was literally dripping down your skin and off of your chin, okay? So just to give you a little example, I know what trauma is. I've experienced some trauma in my life. That doesn't detract from my message one bit. You see, I could have remained a victim. I could have determined that the world is unfair, people are shit, I could have made all sorts of assumptions about life and about my own empowerment. I could have made myself into a victim forever. I could have turned to complaining, becoming a narcissist, trying to control and manipulate people the way I was controlled and manipulated. But I didn't. You see, I don't look back. I'm not angry at my parents. They were confused. They were misled. They were doing the best they could. I admit I was a difficult child. I don't resent those people who did those things, although they were horrible people, horrible, twisted, sick people who ran that place. And the kids that were in it doing those horrible things, you know, they were just victims themselves. They were caught up in the system. They were just trying to get by and manage and survive. So I don't hold any bitterness towards any of them. In fact, if anything, that experience has only made me stronger. It's only made me stronger. Like, going through that, it taught me what courage is. It taught me what it means to know myself. Because I would not let those people break me. I refused to let them make me like them. I refused to play ball. So I was cut off from all communication with my parents also. Couldn't communicate with the outside world at all. Never had a moment's privacy. Was carried around by my belt loop and unable to talk and communicate with people. Couldn't call a lawyer. I was imprisoned against my will, illegally. And this is all verifiable. I actually went on Larry King Live when I was 15 years old. You guys know Larry King, right? Yeah, I was on his show. I was instrumental in getting that place shut down because of speaking out about it once I finally did get out. Once my parents started to realize that something isn't right with this spot. The place was called Straight Incorporated, so you can look it up if you want to check out this story. Further, I was featured in an article in Insight magazine, as well as being on the Morton Downey Jr. show, if you're old enough to remember what that is. So this is just to say that I know a thing or two about trauma and being triggered. And yes, when you've experienced trauma, you can be triggered, and in that moment you are in fight or flight and you don't have the capacity to get out of it. That is true. But that does not mean you're forever a victim. Because when you are able to regain your self-sense and come down from that state of being triggered, you can seek out healing. You can look for ways and means and people who have been through situations like this, who know that there is a way to reverse that trauma, to reverse the psychological effect that it had on you so that you can actually become free of it, so you don't have to remain a victim. So my message will always be about empowerment. It will never disempower people and victimize them. The people who don't like this message, they will look for every excuse. They will look for every possible exception to the rule to keep themselves victimized and to keep other people down as well. And they think they're helping people with this narcissistic compassion. But all they are doing is removing their capacity to access their own indomitable human spirit and to rise up, to heal, to overcome, to become better, to become stronger, more courageous, to have greater faith. My message will never be to demoralize and victimize people. It will be to uplift them, to show them ways that you can overcome. I don't care what's happened to you. The past does not equal your future. And you are not a victim. You're stronger than you think. You have within you a spirit which can overcome anything. Any past event, any difficulty. There are innumerable cases of people throughout history who've experienced, again, far worse than just that one example of trauma from my own youth that I have overcome. Find those people, read about them, listen to their stories, Listen to how they overcame. What are the thoughts that they developed? What are the internal processes? What values did they dig into and lean upon? And what processes did they undergo in order to neutralize that trauma and heal themselves? And then go on to help and share this work with others so that they too would be inspired and be able to heal and move forward. Now, I know this message is going to trigger those people who disagree with me, and that's fine. I'm fine with that because you guys are not who I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to those who have ears to hear this message, who have been traumatized and have been victimized, but they don't want to remain victims. They're not expecting the world to change for them. They don't want free handouts. They don't want to be coddled. They want to find strength within themselves so that they don't have to walk around the world afraid of being triggered, reacting to people constantly, having to shield themselves and protect themselves from the world, avoiding situations, avoiding people for fear that someone might say the wrong thing, call them the wrong name. You're better than that. All of you are better than that. Each of you has this power. So don't listen to those people who would seek to denigrate your spirit. In great courage, I hope this message finds you and inspires you. Opens your heart. Makes you consider possibility. What if there's another way? What if I don't have to be weak? I've been weak. There have been times when I've felt that weak, that doubt, that fear. You don't have to remain there. There is a way out. This is the way.